Hi everybody, we're back with the lovely Juliet for
Hello.
our weekly mental health clinic. If you don't already know, my name is Neil Shah. I'm the Chief De-Stressing Officer at the Stress Management Society and the Chief Insights Officer at International Wellbeing Insights. And I got involved with running these clinics because I really felt that people needed inspiration and empowerment. We are living in a time and an age where there is a lot of fear, a campaign of fear designed to keep us compliant. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lack of control, a sense of powerlessness. And I felt it was really important to really start talking to some of the challenges we're facing and equipping people with the tools, skills, and confidence to find the ways to increase our resilience to be able to navigate the tricky and challenging times that we find ourselves in. And I'm really happy to be joined by the lovely Juliet. So Juliet, do you want to introduce yourself for those that have not met you before?
Yeah, I'm Juliet Willingsworth. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I work in Surrey. And why am I here? Well, I'm getting more and more worried, to be honest. The stories are getting scarier. You know, people who have gone, people who maybe did struggle a little bit with their mental health before the pandemic, perhaps have always been a little bit up and down, but things have got them through, various hobbies get them through. They feel better, they have a bad day, but then the next day they go and do something they really enjoy and they feel great. And now I'm hearing those people actually say they'd rather not be here and they'd rather not wake up in the morning. And sometimes it's said in a light-hearted way, maybe. Not necessarily telling me that they are suicidal, if that's the way we want to phrase it, but are now using words like probably rather not wake up in the morning. That kind of thing, that's not okay. And so whether take it irrespective of politics, whether the government are right or whether the government are wrong, whatever, all of that, but these people need help. People do need help. And there's some people who can afford to go and see a private therapist. There's a lot of people who can't. And things like this, this is great. I've got an anxiety support group that's face-to-face, not face-to-face, it's online, but it's not just a panel. Just things that people really need, they need, because the waiting lists for the NHS is just so long. And yeah, that's really why I'm here and why I think this is so important.
So Juliet, the question that we always start with is, what's going on this week? Now, the stay-at-home order, as I understand it, was abated on the 29th, which is Monday, so people can move and meet in parks. And we were blessed with glorious weather to coincide with that. Happy coincidence, maybe. Seeing a lot more people in the parks. I was out with my dog today. People are sunbathing. What's going on in the world this week, do you think?
Well, like you say, it's almost like last March when we went into lockdown and suddenly the sun came out and it just didn't go until winter, and we had that beautiful summer. I've heard that it's going to snow at the weekend, so I'm not sure we'll all be quite so happy on the weekend. But yeah, we're back out again. So I just wanted to share something that was actually, this actually came through on the newsletter of another therapist, but it really, I really felt it. So she was writing about things that she's kind of noticed over the past year. And she said, something she noticed is that skin hunger is physically painful. So during the first lockdown, I went 69 days without being in the same physical space as another human being. It impacted me deeply. I couldn't at the time put into words a daily scraping sound in the soul, like fingers down a blackboard, a sensation that I couldn't locate or quantify. Eventually, I realized how much I missed the bodily humanity of others. Living alone during lockdown, I could count on one hand the number of times I physically touched someone. I'm not a super touchy-feely person at the best of times, but skin hunger is real and skin hunger hurts. Over the last year, we've been trained to think of people's bodies in terms of contamination, of keeping our distance, of not touching, of risk. And yet, it's as if my skin is reaching out for them, rebelling against the directives of social distancing and the compliance of my front brain. There's a yearning, a longing for human contact, for the warmth of skin on skin. It's lonely and painful to never touch another human being. It hurts physically. Now, as you know, one of the first things that happen, or maybe you don't know, but as many people know, one of the first things that happens when a baby's born and that we think is so important is skin to skin
contact.
And I don't know if you're experiencing this, but I go out running most days of the week, and sometimes people just run by me or walk by me, and that's normal. But so often people jump out the way, or they turn to face the hedge. And the thing is, what we all don't know is whether those people are jumping out of the way for respect of me, or they're jumping out of the way for their own fear. But either way, we're all back out there in the best way we can be, with, I think, slight restriction on numbers. But there's still this keep apart thing. And I'm wondering how people are feeling. Are people feeling that they really do want to give someone a hug, but they mustn't because the other person might not like it? That awkwardness, I imagine, is going on a little bit now.
Absolutely. And I think it's an interesting point you raised about the lack of tactile kinesthetic stimulation, or in layman's terms, physical touch, love. Babies that don't get it, it can be fatal, particularly premature babies. There was a study done of, and don't quote me on the exact numbers, but if I remember correctly, there was a group of premature babies, half of which were given minimal contact, because one of the things they used to do, particularly babies that were in incubators, is minimize contact for fear of passing on things like staph infections. So half the babies were given minimal contact, and the other half of the group were given daily sort of touch. They were held, they were hugged, tactile kinesthetic stimulation. They found that the control group that had no tactile kinesthetic stimulation, there was, I think, something like 40% of them didn't make it. And their average developmental rate was, on average, 6 to 8 weeks behind a normal baby. And the group that had the daily tactile kinesthetic stimulation, again, don't quote me in the exact details, but the study is available online. Number one, they were out of hospital on average 3 months earlier than the ones that weren't touched. They were only on average a couple of weeks behind a normal full-term baby, and they 100% survival rate. So this is incredible. So that's basically, where the whole failure to thrive syndrome research came from. So failure to thrive syndrome is fatal in young babies. As adults, it may not kill us, but it will have a deep mental, physical, and emotional impact. As human beings, we need touch. If we think of our closest relatives in the animal kingdom, chimpanzees, they spend their whole days out in social communities and grooming and touching and holding each other, and we need that. And there was a challenge long before COVID came along, because touch in modern society had been sexualized and it wasn't deemed to be the appropriate thing. Like, in some cultures, hugging and kissing and holding hands, even for blokes, wouldn't have been a sexual thing. I think in Asia, many countries, that blokes would walk down the street, even if they are straight men, would hold hands because it's just a normal thing to do. So we already had a bit of a challenge with this. And then obviously COVID came along, and hugging and kissing was weaponized, which is really dangerous and damaging, particularly for young children, where don't hug granny because you might kill her. Do you think they're going to forget on June the 21st all of these messages that have been imprinted into their psyche? So I think you've raised a really important point. And what I find really fascinating is a hug releases many hormones, including oxytocin, which, amongst many other things, not only is it going to make you feel happy and feel that sense of connection, but it actually boosts your immune system.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know the havening technique. I don't know much about the havening technique, but it's it's a therapeutic technique, and it involves stroking of your own arms, and it's about.
Where you're going with this? Sorry.
The other week when you made us all slap ourselves. There's no havening technique, really. I just want you to. So it's something to do with the amygdala and just calming it. And I'm not going to try and explain what the havening technique is doing, because I'm not trained in it and I don't really know. I've just watched a seminar. But, they liken it to when, a child is distressed, how we stroke the child, we stroke their arms to calm them. And that's actually doing something in our brain at the same time. And without it.
Because when you hurt yourself, what do we do to soothe someone? We stroke them.
Yeah,
My dog, like if he's like hurt his paw, he'll come up and he'll hold his paw out like that. And if I stroke his head, he'll calm down, even if I'm not touching the part of him that's hurt, because there's something
exactly.
soothing about it. But this is fascinating. Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist in the 60s or the 70s, she did a huge amount of research on physical connection, tactile kinesthetic stimulation. And her assertion was it takes 30 hugs a day for optimal well-being.
Wow.
And we now live in a world where we are told don't hug anyone, have 0 hugs. So that's compromising our well-being. And this for me is something that is of particular concern, because there are things that we could do to promote our well-being in terms of what we eat, our diet, our well-being, physical exercise, talking to people, social connection, managing our mental emotional state, sleeping well. None of these things are being promoted, but we are being heavily told social distance, wear a mask, sanitize, which, I'm not suggesting these are good or bad things, but there are things that are way more beneficial to boost our immune system, which is our primary source of defense in the face of a public health concern, particularly a viral one.
Yeah.
Which I don't see posters about. I don't see television advertising about this. But yet,
No.
this for me should be kind of the first point of call before we think of secondary measures like social distancing and mask wearing and those kind of things. So this I find very, very interesting, particularly as the things we're promoting create fear, whereas the kind of things I'm talking, holistic health, functional health, actually create happiness and well-being.
Yeah, and I think while people are out there in their masses in the parks, yeah, we don't know. I wonder if there's a conversation going on about, are you happy to hug? Are you not happy to hug? Are we allowed to hug? What we're
Absolutely.
allowed to do? What we're not allowed to do? It's not so clear. I'm not sure if it's so clear at the moment whether if we're going to go with what we're allowed, what we're permitted to do, whether meeting up means that we can hug each other as well. And yeah, I think there's certainly going to be some people feeling very uncomfortable out there, not really knowing what the right protocol is.
And I think this is where it's probably worth us diving into some of the questions we got from this week, because the first question is very much in line with that. It says, excuse me, I've had enough of this government. I've had enough of having my rights taken away at the stroke of a mad minister's pen. I'm living in fear of all the terrible atrocities they might yet try, as well as the harms that an unnecessary lockdown has already done to our basic liberties. I understand I can get a vaccine against COVID, one whose protection I would look forward to having, but one which I morally cannot take unless the government makes a legally binding pledge not to domestically implement vaccine passes. But can I get vaccine against the government intrusion? Is there anything I can do to make myself immune to intolerable changes in so-called laws, which the crooks in Parliament keep using to take our rights away? And there's some lines added to this. Last time I looked, a law had to be pledged in a pre-election party manifesto, then debated in Parliament, then a majority achieved, then back and forth with the Lords, multiple rounds of expert analysis and impact assessment. Another reading in the Commons, the Lords, the Royal Assent, and good many months of public information campaign saying this is exactly what the new law will be before it gets on the books. That doesn't seem to be the case. That's quite a specific question, but I think that does talk to many of the things we've already been talking about, that people are feeling fed up. They are feeling like our liberties are being taken away. They are also feeling shortchanged at the democratic system, which has failed us. It doesn't feel like a democracy at the moment. And that in itself is creating more fear, more confusion, more lack of faith in the people that are supposed to be leading us. And I think this is one that's really worth exploring, because one of the things that we've been talking about with this campaign of fear is when you are scared and you've lost faith in the people that are supposed to be doing right by you, that in itself is going to start to have a real impact on your mental and emotional state. What are your thoughts around that, Julia?
It's really difficult. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know what the right thing to say is. There seems to be a lot of people out there who are really kind of, I don't want to say ignoring the government, because that sounds arrogant and potentially selfish, but they're just not focusing too much on it, not getting overwhelmed by it, not letting it take over them really. And they go and they sit in the park with a friend and they have a nice day. And actually, I've noticed, I think, that some of the people who are really, really angry with the government and really quite fixated on what the government are doing are abiding by the rules quite strictly because they're so engrossed in following the government more out of anger and frustration than anything else. And actually, to some extent, there's other people out there who are just kind of living their life a little bit more freely. And I don't, I'm not here to say people should break the rules or do what they want and ignore the government. But I think without, I also don't want to stop people, protesting and campaigning, because I think that if that's where your passion is, then it's really important. But actually, sometimes just letting go a little bit can just help you to relax that little bit.
Yeah, I think that there's much we can add to this conversation, and a big part is honoring your truth. There's always going to be someone out there that says, you must believe this because this is true. You must act upon this. You must abide by this because I'm telling you to. Blind faith is one of the most dangerous things in the world, according to my belief system. You should believe it because you've lived it and you've experienced it and you know it to be true in your heart of hearts. And if you don't even have kind of the evidence to back it up, you need to really tune in and trust yourself and your own gut instinct. And typically, we can tell when somebody's lying, right? Unless they're really good. Something will give it away. There'll be some sense. You won't have any way to be able to prove that. But you're like, yeah, it just doesn't wash.
Doesn't feel right.
Yeah, something doesn't feel right. If you want a great example of that, look at Boris when he's announcing the first lockdown. If you want a great example, you don't need to be an expert in body language. I'm trained in body language, and I watched that 3 times, and I picked up so many things which made me confident he didn't believe what he was saying, let alone expecting us to believe it, because there were certain things that he did that gave that away. Now, like I said, you don't need to be trained. If you're a parent, you know when your kids are lying because you can tell, right? Would you agree with that, Julia? Can you tell when your kids are lying and trying to, pull a fast one? Because they'll give it away. And what I'm saying here is, again, you will know when you're lying. You can't kid yourself. You know what the truth is. But we've basically fallen out of congruence with ourselves because we are so engrossed in what's happening externally rather than what's happening internally. Do not ever override the internal message. When you're, in that relationship in your heart of hearts, you know it's not right, but you just keep trying to persevere, or you're in that job that you know is just bringing you misery, or you're engaged in some kind of habit or behavior, whether that's drinking or smoking or what you eat or what you do or how you spend your time, or sitting there watching Netflix and playing the PlayStation, and in your heart of hearts, this just it's not serving me, but you still keep doing it. You're not honoring yourself. And I think the only thing that I can ask anyone to do is honor your truth. Take some time to go inside, unplug from the matrix long enough. Maybe the next time you're out on your walk, or when you're sat at home, or just sit in the garden on your deck chair, or have a long bath, and actually think about what does feel right to you, what does resonate with you, and honor.
Oh yeah.
And that, for me, is one of the biggest gifts that this situation has given us. It's time to reflect and to tune in to your own internal radar that will guide your way. Because we're looking for the answers in the wrong place. And, and forgive me, I don't mean to cause any offense to anyone, but there are many sort of political and religious institutions that are played on that. But we will give you the answers. Do what we tell you to do. Vote for our party, or come to our building on this particular day of the week. Read our book and we'll answer all your questions. Well, really, that external kind of reference point can be useful. Don't get me wrong. If you're using that to go internally, to really understand what are your morals, what are your values, what are your ethics. Don't take on board somebody else's belief system. Find your own. And if you can use your religion or your political beliefs to help with that, great. But that does not replace your personal responsibility. Do not delegate that externally. And that's why we find ourselves in the situation we're in, because we've delegated that to people that maybe don't hold, not maybe, I'll start again, the people that categorically do not hold our best interests at heart.
Yeah, and it feels so much more comfortable when you follow your intuition as well. And it's also, I think it's also okay to change. People have, the government have taken massive U-turns throughout this whole thing, but so have people I know, for example, they maybe had a really strong feeling at one point in time, and then and the world changes, things change, situations change all the time, and it's
Absolutely.
okay to be fluid as well and change accordingly. If something that felt right last month doesn't feel right now, then change. You don't have to rigidly stick to a stance.
And have there been times in your life, Juliet, where you change your opinions or belief systems or perspectives? Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
up until 7 years ago, I ate meat twice a day every day of my life, and then I went vegan overnight because I saw things in a slightly different way. My perspective shifted. I stopped drinking alcohol a couple of years ago again because my perspective shifted. What served me and what I believed before changed as I learned more and I realized what was my truth. I'm not here to say to anyone what your truth is, but I am encouraging, no, I'm imploring you all to dive into what is your truth, what is meaningful to you. Because if we're all able to dive into that journey of self-realization, of self-actualization, of connection, of contribution, the higher rungs of Maslow's hierarchy, and we get out of the bottom rung of safety, security, and survival, because we do live in a world that's keeping you in that place. Because
how many people are not in that place as well, though? How many people are not even meeting those basic needs?
And that is scary. And how many people been pushed even further below the bottom rung as a result of what's been happening over the last months? It's a really good point. And actually, our next question is very much in line with that. Furlough has driven me mad, and I'm more stressed now than when we were at full capacity. I remember working 12, 13-hour days and always being fully worn out. Now I'm at home, I have no job, and I'm more stressed than I've ever been before. I don't sleep at night. I'm constantly arguing. I've been drinking, and more recently, I've started to turn to drugs.
Stress, anxiety.
Now, what I think is really scary about that particular question is when we have too much on and when we're overloaded and overwhelmed, you just wish that you could just have something that takes the pressure off. But then what a lot of people don't realize, at the other end of the spectrum, at one end of the spectrum, you've got extreme stress and you get to the point of burnout. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got zero pressure and demands. And then you get bored, sluggish, apathetic, indifferent, negative, cynical, no energy, no passion, no motivation. You never get anything done. So burnout at one stage, at the other end of the spectrum, I describe it as rust out. Now, if we kind of look at stress and pressure and sort of mental health as kind of like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears approach. Burnout, the porridge is too hot. Rust out, the porridge is too cold. Then you've got the sweet spot, which in professional sports is described as the performance zone. It's where your mental, physical, emotional state is optimized and you're able to function at your very, very best. So, what a lot of people experienced pre-COVID was burnout, too much pressure. Many people are still there, but particularly those that have been furloughed or have kind of, not really got the ability to work or be able to apply themselves in a meaningful way, might find themselves in that rust out zone. And that, for me, is as damaging, potentially even more damaging, because that's where you get to the point where you're likely to go into depression. That's a pathway to really poor mental health.
What are your thoughts on, because this is something I've noticed a lot with my clients, that people who maybe haven't necessarily been fulfilled in their career, but have been in a situation what it sounds like this person is in, where they've got a career and they work really hard all of the time, and that doesn't necessarily satisfy them, but they then do a lot of things which really do. So they have some great holidays every year, or they go for weekends, weekends away with friends, or they have nights out with friends, all these different things that we do in life to kind of trade off that hard work. And now they can't trade off. There's no like the things that are good times for them have not been allowed. So there's been no good times.
Absolutely. And also, whether the work you're doing is stressful or otherwise, there is still that sense of accomplishment and the sense of achievement. I'm doing something, right?
Yeah.
When that's taken away, there could be a loss of self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth. Because ultimately, for a short period of time, for a couple of weeks, it might be nice and you might bake some banana bread and do a couch to 5K challenge or all of these other things that people did at the beginning. They learned new skills and languages. But that gets boring pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because, hobbies are great as counterbalances to productive activities. But if your life was just hobbies and no productive activities, no sense of contribution, I think after a while it would get tiring, right? It's like, you know, if I said to you, you can go on holiday for the rest of your life, you would love it for the first few weeks, few months.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
after a while, you know, you get bored and you get itchy feet and you get frustrated. And I think this is now a year on, you know, last week when I saw people like lighting birthday candles and celebrating the 1 year anniversary of lockdown, I was like, there's nothing to celebrate. This is tragic. You know, what's happened over the last 12 months is, you know, we should not have ever been marking a year's anniversary, but here we are. But I think we should be looking at this with kind of a somber remorse that we allowed ourselves to get a year in. But I think, yeah, this for me is a key point, because there are people at either end of the spectrum. I'm finding that actually the vast majority of people are either in the burnout because they're pushing themselves harder than before, or they're at the end of the spectrum where they can't do anything. What would be your advice to someone that is stuck in that rust out zone? That, you know, this person that has written in that they're furloughed, that is, you know, they're feeling like at the end of the day they feel like they're going mad because they're not able to express themselves.
Actually, I've had a few clients in a specific situation, and that is where they have been watching TV basically all the time because there's not been much else to do. And it's only through our discussions that, they've actually come to see me because they've got addicted to alcohol or drugs, similar again to this person by the sounds of things. And through exploring, what we've realized is that they've been spending a lot of time watching TV. And the people that I've been speaking to are people that wouldn't usually watch TV. And what they've realized is they don't enjoy TV. And they've forgotten what actually brings them joy. And I don't mean the going out, the holidaying, that stuff. I mean things like playing the piano or dancing. And what they've been doing is sitting and watching TV because maybe that's the habit we got into. You know, it was good at first. We could just spend every night in front of the TV with a gin and tonic or whatever. And that's what they've got into, and that's what they've been doing. And then they've realized they don't enjoy the TV. They don't like it. And they're using the alcohol or the drugs to get through the TV. Like, I can't enjoy this. You know, I just need that to actually be able to sit here and watch it. But they've not really, you know, this is all unconscious, obviously. But when we've started to talk about, well, what actually does bring you joy and what enables you to really be in the moment and completely absorbed in something. And, you know, it's things like playing the piano, actually for a lot of people, but things that there are things out there. And when they've realized that and instead turned to do that thing in the evening rather than the TV, suddenly they're getting back into the mind state that the alcohol and the drugs achieve. But they're doing it through something healthy.
Absolutely, because yeah, there can be sort of a sense of anesthetizing your state with drugs, alcohol. Food is another one that a lot of people turn to, just, you know, dulling the senses a little bit, so you just you don't feel so much. And really, I would go in the other direction. Feel more. Do the things that bring you to life, whether that be, you know, some kind of physical activity, sport, playing music, singing, dancing around your kitchen to a fantastic playlist, gardening, learning a new language, you know, baking a new recipe. There are so many different things that we can do to allow ourselves to feel more. But often when we're hurting and we're in trauma, we don't want to feel. You know, you're looking for the painkillers, whether that be pharmaceutical, recreational drugs, alcohol, or a lot of people do turn to food as a bit of a painkiller.
Oh yeah.
The chances are long term it actually makes the pain worse, not better.
Self-harm as well. Self-harm is,
sadly,
I've spoke to people about.
Yeah, and obviously we did cover that last week, and that's obviously, it's a tragic one, but it's important just to remind everyone that people that have those kind of really negative behaviors like self-harm or turning to substances, with every negative behavioral trait, there's always a positive intention underneath it.
Of course, yeah.
And when we start to explore what is that positive intention and what other ways can we have our needs met, because, you know, people might turn to alcohol or drugs because they want to escape or they want to feel less. People may self-harm because the emotional pain there is so great that the physical pain masks that, or they just want to feel something because they're feeling numb inside. I find that particularly with people that are prescribed antidepressants, where they just stop feeling and they just want to feel something, because it doesn't just stop the good feelings, sorry, the bad feelings, it stops all the feelings, and we start to feel quite numb and isolated and disconnected, which can be quite a scary place to be.
And as if we don't enough already.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Great, we've got a few more questions. This is an interesting one. How can I deal with the loss of family, friends, and work pressures? Sorry, how can I deal with the loss of family and friends coupled with extreme work pressures? So it's not been clear whether the loss of family or friends is because they've died or because they're not able to see them. So whether it's a permanent or a temporary loss of family or friends. Now, I'm going to attach this to some of the questions we've had over the last couple of weeks, where there was a couple of questions we had a few weeks ago around people that have lost friends and families because of differing perspectives. There have been people that lost friends and family due to death, whether directly or COVID or other illnesses, which is sadly has been quite common. And it's been felt even more pronounced, primarily because you can't grieve in the normal way. You can't have funerals or celebrations of a life like we normally would. But also there's the physical separation of not being able to see sort of families and friends. So I think if we can focus on that sense of disconnection and loss of connection, whether that be permanent because they're not with us anymore, potentially permanent because we've fallen out, or temporary because we can't see them. So what can we do to talk about bereavement? Because it's all bereavement in some way, shape or form, whether it's permanent or temporary bereavement, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. We were working with a company recently, just before lockdown, that made a number of people redundant. Company of about 12,000 employees, they made 4,000 people redundant. So, good chunk of their workforce. And a lot of these people have been working there for 15, 20 years. So you're working side by side with people that you started your career with, and 20 years later, you're still working with them. What they went through, they didn't recognize it as such, but we went in to do a program with them, a corporate change program. And essentially we ran a bereavement program because people were grieving the loss of their colleagues, that you've been sat next to Juliet for 20 years, and now all of a sudden you turn around and Juliet's not there anymore.
Massive, yeah.
It's a huge loss, because you used to like talk to her about what's going on the weekend or turn into whatever. But I think, broadly speaking, talking about bereavement, which will come in sort of different places. What are your thoughts on how can we deal with that in these extraordinary circumstances?
Do you know what? It's so hard. And what I almost want to say is I just don't even know, because we shouldn't be in these circumstances. It's almost like sticking a plaster over it. I mean, and I think we said this last week, like we harp on about self-care, and it's like self-care, self-care, self-care. We've done a year of self-care, like we're done with self-care. And it's a little bit like that. It's like you shouldn't have to be going through this. Yes, the loss of someone who's died, that, that's not a different situation, but yeah, that person's died. But if it's your friend who lives around the corner but you can't see them because of restrictions, then that is really another thing. I guess now we can go and meet up and have people in our garden. So maybe if some people I think some people are perhaps feeling the opposite, and I don't, I want to go with the question and not the opposite, but some people are feeling that kind of sudden fear of going out and seeing people. They've actually quite enjoyed, realized they're introverts and they don't want to go and live an extrovert life. But for the people who really, really do, are really grieving that loss of their friends, well, personally, I would be soaking it up as much as I can now we're allowed, and hope that we don't have another situation like we had last year, where we had a summer of fun and then, but go on.
And I was just going to add to that even during the restrictions, there are certain exemptions, particularly around sort of mental health. If you feel that your mental health and well-being is compromised and you need a friend or you need support, that was sanctioned within the previous regulations. I know it's starting to change, but if we don't find ourselves there again, it's really important that, for your own welfare and well-being, if you need someone, then you should reach out, and that's a permissible reason.
Absolutely, yeah.
Regulations. And also, be patient and gentle with yourself. Losing someone permanently or even temporarily, whether that's a breakup of a relationship or loss of a loved one, or it's just separation anxiety because you can't spend time with the people you care about. Be gentle with yourself. Allow those feelings to come to the surface and be expressed. Burying them actually can make you feel worse. Talk to people. Reach out. Who's in your support network that you could talk to that would be there and offer you a shoulder or an ear, that will create a safe space for you to be able to express whatever it is that you're feeling. I think that's really, really important.
And actually, for some people, as you said, we don't know whether this is death or just having not seen people or fallen out with people. But if people have found that their tribe, if you like, is no longer their tribe, it can be like maybe moving to a completely new area where you've got to kind of come into this new place and make new friends, and that's challenging and that can be scary. I have done that in my life, and actually I did it when the internet was around, and I think it's a lot easier. I kind of was on Twitter and hashtag of my local area, and people arrange meetups and things like that, and it can be done. You do have to be a little bit brave because you have to put yourself out there and go to these things. Maybe some clubs. I know that there are some websites which arrange. What's the one? Meetups.com, is it? Yeah. And maybe finding little things like that, or other clubs, social environments, gyms, places like that, where you can be around people and you can have the odd chat in the changing rooms, or to people while you're having a coffee before you start the club, and just getting to know people again, maybe new people, or maybe being back in the old circles. Yeah, it's a difficult time.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple more questions that I want to cover. This is an interesting one. How do I keep my family positive when I'm feeling pressured, stressed, down, despondent, and feeling very negative myself? Now, that's a really interesting question, because I've heard this from a lot of people. Like, I've got to be the one that's strong for everyone else. I think I found myself there early on, where I felt like I needed to be strong for my colleagues and the people around me. And just be the strong one, be the brave one, and not allow myself to express my feelings. And I think the analogy I'd offer is one that I often talk about, and it's that of the safety instructions when you get on a plane. When you get on a plane, those metal tubes that fly in the sky that we all used to go in once upon a time. Many of you have probably forgotten that experience, but yeah, they still exist apparently. They're just covered in dust.
Sometimes I see them in the sky.
Sorry?
Sometimes I see them in the sky and I wonder who's going somewhere.
Yeah.
That's it.
Who is traveling on those planes when everyone's been told that you can't go anywhere? Stay at home. But yeah, like I'm definitely seeing a lot less of them in the sky. But they're still there. So anyway, before we go off on a tangent about holidays and the potential that we might not have a holiday this year, or foreign holiday anyway.
That's it, yeah.
You get on the plane and they're going through the safety instructions before the plane takes off. And they talk about a loss in cabin pressure and the oxygen mask come down. What do they always say you should do before you attempt to put a mask on someone else?
On your own first.
Oh my God, surely that's such a selfish thing to do.
Yeah.
Putting it on yourself first. What? I guess the next question following on from that is, who is the most important person in your life?
Has to be yourself.
It has to be, but it's interesting, even the choice of words you use. For a lot of people that would say themselves, they would say it has to be, or it should be yourself, is often what people would say. No one says it's me. What's the reason for it? And if you ask that question and you weren't wearing your therapist hat, what would be your natural reaction to it? I know you're a mother. Would you think of your children if asked?
Of course, yeah. Children.
Of course, right?
Yeah.
People often think of their children, their partners, their mum, their dad, their husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, their dog, their postman, their pot plant, someone or something other than yourself. Okay, I'm kind of half joking, but you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
But we often prioritize everyone before ourselves. We're right at the back of the list. I find this fascinating, because actually prioritizing your own needs is deemed to be relatively selfish in the modern world, right?
Yeah.
In fact, we even have phrases to support that.
Yeah.
What kind of things do we say? It's better to give than to receive, right? We all heard that phrase. It's a very common phrase. A lot of people don't realize the true origins of that phrase. So the original phrase it came from a Greek proverb, which was, it's better to be in a position to give than to need to receive.
Mm.
It was changed in the 4th century by an organization that gives out a basket on a Sunday afternoon asking people to put money in it. So they adapted a little bit to suit their own needs. I'm, not here judging, but that led to a bit of a cultural hangover, because then that, filtered out into society that actually, it's not good to think of yourself, you must think of others. No, the Greeks had it right, which is, it's better that I'm able to give than to need to receive. Now, if you are not prioritizing your own needs, then you're not in a position to give, because you can't pour from an empty bucket.
You can give so much more. You're fulfilled.
The people that are in the best position to make a difference in the world are ones that have had their own needs met.
Yeah. We protect other people as well. So many of us assume other people's feelings and then try to protect them.
Absolutely. Excuse me. We may be enabling their poor habits and behaviors. And going back to the plane, and that's why, as much as your natural reaction, maybe I need to put the mask on my children and my granny and the person next to me is injured, you're no good to anyone else if you're collapsed, if you're suffocating, you're passed out. The person that's taking care of their own needs is the one that's best equipped to help everybody else. So going back to the question, my response to that would be, if you want to be able to support your family to the best of your ability, you can't do that if stressed out, exhausted, burnt out, on the verge of a breakdown yourself. So taking the time to look after yourself means that you will have extra capacity to be able to support your family, to keep them positive, to be able to navigate these tough and challenging times. I know that's hard, and it's not the natural reaction, and it can feel very selfish to do so. But I say to you, prioritizing your own needs is not being selfish, it's actually being selfless.
And I think it's okay to show, I'm wondering if this person has maybe got children and is trying to remain positive about life, to stop the children feeling sad. But this is my own personal thoughts, so it's not, I wouldn't call it advice, but I think it's okay to say to children, you know what, this isn't normal. And we should not be expected to feel normal in this situation for all the reasons we talk about on this mental health clinic. This isn't natural behavior for a human being, and therefore we are going to suffer as a result. And it's okay, because when those children learn that when they're not living as they naturally should, then they might suffer, and it's going to teach them all of these things that are so important. And whether there's a partner there, a husband, a wife, whoever it is, also I think it's okay to say, actually, I'm feeling really quite rubbish today.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely, totally agree. All right, so I've got a last question here. It's a big one, and it's quite a harrowing one. My husband and I set up a business 5 years ago, turned it into a very successful restaurant, won many awards, was thriving, was in the process of setting up a second branch. When the first lockdown hit, it hit us hard, but we found ways to navigate it. When we got to the second lockdown, just before Christmas, it was tough, but we thought we'd be out before Christmas and we'll still be able to make this right. This last one has been the final nail in the coffin, and we've lost everything. Years and years worth of hard work has been flushed down the toilet. My family are overwhelmed. I've lost all my staff. I've lost my self-esteem and my self-worth. And very recently, my husband tried to end his own life. I'm at my wit's end. I don't know how to cope anymore. My 11-year-old son is also now starting to display some really worrying behaviors. Help.
It is harrowing, like you say. I don't think it's unique.
Stories like that, Julia, are why I do what I do.
Yeah, me too.
It breaks my heart just reading that question. It's like really traumatizing to think that people put blood, sweat, and tears into building a life for themselves and their family, and by some poor decisions and basically people making mistakes to save their own skin, have essentially destroyed the lives of so many.
Yeah, and
these are the stories we don't hear. These are the stories that don't end up in the papers.
And I'm sure, I don't know if you feel like me, but these are the stories that I hear. These are the stories that you hear. And these are the stories, like you say, they don't end up in the papers. And it's infuriating that people don't know. People don't know that the virus is terrible. And I, you know, my bestest friend lost her cousin who was far too young to die. I'd been there with somebody, not physically, but whilst they went through that loss. I know that that's terrible, but these are the stories I'm hearing as well. These are the stories, and it's yeah. You go. You've got stuff to say.
I don't even know what to say. My heart breaks reading that. People are basically just expressing themselves. You know, we have our inalienable human rights, freedom to expression, freedom of speech, freedom to work, freedom to travel. These people have had their freedom, their freedoms and human rights taken away. They're basically doing what, you know, they have they should have the freedom to do, which is to live their lives and run their businesses, you know, create a future for their families. You know, a decision was made to take that away. So the situation they're in is through no fault of their own. It's not through a mistake they made or poor decisions or anything else. It's because someone deemed that it was too great a risk, even though that's not supported by data. So there's two parts to this. One is kind of looking at it from a macro perspective, but also I would really like to respond to what this person's saying, because they're obviously in a place where at the wit's end.
Massively, yeah.
I think that there is a much bigger issue, and this is exactly you said, Julia. This is what we're fighting for. The people who have had their mental health, their well-being, their livelihoods, their lives quite literally ripped away from them, and they're sitting in a place where they're just literally looking at a brick wall. And for someone that's put their heart and soul into something, and through no fault of their own, if you've made a mistake, you might be able to reconcile that. But when someone has made a decision that has destroyed your life and taking everything away from you, that can be really hard to reconcile. And that's when many people will get to the point, it's like, you know, it sounds like that's what may have happened here, where they don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
Now, I guess for anyone facing that situation directly, that is one choice. There are other choices. The one thing I implore you to do is don't make a temporary decision. Sorry, don't make a permanent decision to a temporary problem. Because whatever you're going through, this moment will pass. It's the universal law of impermanence. No matter how tough, how challenging, how harrowing it gets, a better day will come. Just the way it is.
I was trying to write a really I suddenly had this real epiphany thought the other day, which I started to write down, and I didn't get to the end of it. And I was thinking about anxiety, and I'm still trying to work out the end. But it's like trying to plan a future that has unknown variables, using your current circumstances or using the situation you fear. And it sounds like this is maybe a little bit where they are. They can't see a future because they're trying to see a future that they don't know what it's going to be like, using the circumstances they're in right now, which is a situation where they're completely unable to just get up and carry on and get up and, you know, just start from the beginning again. They can't do that now because of the restrictions.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think that's where not only are you in a deep, dark valley, but you can't see how to climb out of it. Yeah. And that's where it becomes really challenging. Now, here's the thing. You're looking at it from within the deep, dark valley. You know, it's next to impossible to see how to get out. There will be a point where you'll be looking back and think, yeah, okay, it was tough, but it was only just around the corner. There was there was a way out. And I think this is one of the things for us to consider is things will change, things will get better, things will improve one way or another. So it's really, really important that you don't start looking just at the brick wall in front of you. Maybe take a little bit of time to sit back and to look up and to look left and to look right, and just stop and pause and to consider what other options do you have available.
And being in the moment as well, because I think when we're feeling this way, we forget actually right now, in this minute, just this minute, we're okay.
Absolutely.
And if we're okay in the next minute, we're okay. You don't have to worry about 10 weeks time, 2 weeks time.
Exactly. If you've got a roof over your head today, if there's food in the fridge that you can feed your family with, if you're safe and you've got stuff today, you've bought yourself another day. And if we have to go day by day for this precise moment, then that's what we need to do, just to be able to get ourselves to a point where we can see beyond this moment. And I think the next part of the question is how to support other people. Because if you're in a situation like, I believe it's a lady is in, where she's concerned about her husband's mental health, and she's starting to be concerned about her child. Just mentioned the age of the child. But she starts to be concerned about her child. Obviously, a child that's been subject to this kind of situation. They too also will be impacted, and they'll be able to pick up energetically what's going on with their parents as well. How do we support the people around us when we ourselves are struggling and suffering?
It's really challenging. Like we just talked about with the other person, actually we don't have to. We need to support ourselves. But yeah, I mean, how do you support yourself when your partner is suicidal? And there isn't external support, and you've got no money to pay for a therapist, and the NHS waiting list is years long. And how do you? I don't know. The one thing I would say though is there are therapists out there who will do work very, very discounted at the moment. I've actually been contacted by a therapist who will work for free as well, 5 hours a week, I think they want to do. And so it's always worth reaching out to perhaps a local therapist and saying, look, I just have no money. I remember when I was doing my hypnotherapy training, and our teacher telling us that he'd once worked with someone for £1 a session because that was all she could afford. And there are people out there who will help. So if you're in that much of a situation that there is no way out, then I think that is something worth doing.
In addition to that, there obviously are resources like the Samaritans that are available. There are calm, crisis. There are several support resources out there which are accessible, which I would encourage you to use, not just for yourself, but if you're concerned about someone else, you can reach out to them on their behalf as well. But the key thing is don't suffer in silence. It's one of those things when you're going through something like this, it may feel like asking for help is airing your dirty laundry, whereas I disagree with that. What do they say? Problem shared is a problem halved, or maybe even solved. And sometimes just the process of being able to get it off your chest lightens the load a little bit. It just feels like you're kind of taking some of that burden away by being able to share it with someone that's willing to listen. And in this moment where we have less social interaction than we would in normal times, we're not meeting up with people, seeing our friends, our work colleagues, you may feel that the time and the platforms and the opportunities to be able to share and open up have been removed from us. So this is where we need to take a little bit of extra time and effort, whether that's to organize a Skype or a Zoom call, which I know is not the same, or to arrange to meet up in a park, or worst case, if you really are concerned about your mental well-being, go and see someone. Again, for me, that will be an appropriate way to bend the rules, because ultimately your welfare and your well-being, safeguarding is the most important thing beyond anything else.
Yeah, we can have people in our garden now. That's not breaking the rules. So yeah, but you're absolutely right. It's not breaking the rules if you need to for your mental health. It's not. So yeah,
there are certain situations where my personal advice, this is not my professional advice, I'm not speaking on behalf of my organization, this is Neil. There are certain times where it's better to use your judgment, tune into what's right, and ask for forgiveness, not permission. And particularly when someone's welfare, well-being, and safeguarding comes into it, that has to be the priority. So do the right thing and ask for forgiveness, not permission. I'm not saying that generally speaking, if it's just like for a social guy and have a drink or whatever, like that would not be an appropriate use of kind of bending the rules. But if it's genuinely for someone's welfare or well-being, then and if that's the difference between someone's safety or otherwise, that's a time where appropriate interventions are required. And if that means you need to go around and see someone or take some course of action, I think that is imperative that happens. Yeah. Great. So as ever, it's a broad range of topics. Some of the questions today have been really quite deep ones. So it's it's good. It's challenging that we're having them, but it's good that people are willing to open up and really express themselves and ask for the help and support they need. And that's why we're here. You know,
I think opening up is sometimes it takes so much courage to do that.
absolutely.
And this might, for some people, this might just be the first step. This might be the bravest thing they've been able to do, write that out on paper. And if that, you know, maybe we might not even get the nail on the head with our answers, but if them having that courage to write that out means that they can then take the next step and go and speak to somebody, whether that's a friend, the Samaritans, or a private therapist, or their doctor, then that's one good thing, in my opinion.
And if nothing else, I'm hoping we've answered your questions, but if nothing else, you've been heard. We receive all your questions, we read all your questions, we're taking this on board, we're factoring in that into all the work we're doing around sort of the mental health aspects of our campaign. And, you know, our deepest, most sincere desire is that this is the last time we find ourselves in this situation, that you know, the promises that have been made are kept to, and this is a one-way road with no U-turns in the future. So yeah, the weather's getting better, which is good. That always brings a bit of joy and a bit of lift to people's spirits. Spring is definitely here. The clocks have gone forward. And we are now obviously starting to enjoy a greater sense of liberty than we've had in recent times, and we're hoping that will continue. But you know, we can only do this with your support and your engagement. So keep your questions coming in, keep your comments and your feedback. Send all of your questions to info@timeforrecovery.org. You can find out more about the upcoming clinics and all the work that we're doing at recoveryourspark.com. And yeah, obviously send us your messages on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook as well. So always a pleasure. So much love to you all. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will all be back next week. Any final words from you, Julia?
No, have a good week.
Yeah, fantastic.
Enjoy the snow, apparently.
Well, enjoy the sun and the snow, or the sun and the snow if you get both. But yeah, so much love, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
See you.